to be good at technology, I'm here to tell you about ancient Greece. Ancient Greece and a whole lot of other stuff that's related to ancient Greece, at least in terms of me, which, you know, might mean that some of this is not all that related to ancient Greece in your guys' eyes, but you know what? Too bad. It's my story. I'm Homer here, actually. We don't even know if Homer existed. The name Homer, he's really only brought up in the historical record as the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and the fact is, the Iliad and the Odyssey probably were not even written by the same person. Just judging by the text and the way that it's written, they were probably written by two separate people. So there's our first lie from history. Just get ready to have your knowledge of ancient Greek, whatever, shaken up. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe you already know all this stuff. Homer is fake. We don't know. The name Homer, a lot of people say that he was a poet, he was blind, because the name Homeros might mean blind, it might also mean captive. So it might mean that he was just, like, he was a hostage. We don't know. We don't know. Zeus was Zeus is the OG player. Much to his wife's chagrin. I don't think there's a single Greek deity that I would not be scared of except maybe Hestia. And even then I would be scared of her just in the sense that, like, she's a goddess, she's way more powerful than I would ever be. But she seems reasonable, unlike most of the Greek gods. What this whole story is about. That's what I was saying. Ancient Greece was not a monolith. Ancient Greece was made up of several independent city-states. Ancient Greeks did not think of themselves as ancient Greeks or even ancient Hellenes, which Greek is the English word. We have no record. Is there a date to when the first book was written? So writing, I have a whole YouTube video about, like, the invention of writing and the alphabets and stuff. It's on my YouTube channel if you want to watch that. But writing did not really start with books. And so writing arose independently in a few different societies. I mean, yeah, a lot of history is just these people said stuff. How right are they? How accurate? We don't know. We have historians from ancient Greece and Rome who other ancient historians are like, don't listen to that guy, he's definitely lying. And then we look and, like, some of it's not actually that bad. That's why I'm saying this is the Iliad. This is not a historical documentary about ancient Greece. I don't know how many of you guys have read the Iliad in Greek or English. So the Iliad was probably first written down sometime in like 700, 800 BCE. Its oldest complete manuscript might go all the way back to the 10th century BCE. The Iliad, it basically means Troy story. Ilium is the name of the city of Troy. We just call it Troy. English. The Iliad we have today, though, was probably not the original version because we can actually see where it has been edited. The text wasn't even stable, as in there were still changes being made until, like, the year 150 CE. So some say that's just because the Greek poets were idiots. Some say that it was just people editing stuff the best way they knew how. The story's in the Iliad. If there was a Trojan War, it probably happened several centuries before the Iliad was actually written. The Iliad does contain stories that are older than the Iliad itself because the way that they are described or not described in the Iliad indicates that Homer probably knew his audience. I'm just gonna say Homer. We don't know who Homer was. We don't know. I don't know. The historians don't know, I don't think. None of the ones that I looked at knew that. We don't know who Homer was. It's okay. Anyway, the Iliad does mention these Greek myths that are not really described in the story because Homer probably knew that his audience was already aware of these stories, which means they're probably older than the Iliad. The Iliad was probably already being told before it was written down, though, because the Greek alphabet itself didn't really a Trojan. That's because Troy fell in like 1200 BCE. This isn't even about history, this is the Iliad, it's not historically accurate. Actually, there was a whole... while I was researching, I came upon quite the rant from this one Roman historian about, I have it somewhere in my notes, but he was like, you guys think that I don't know what I'm talking about just because I was born later than Homer, even though I tell it how it really happened, and Homer just makes stuff up. Like, this is, again, several centuries after Homer would have written stuff down. But this dude is so mad. We don't know who Homer was. The only times that he is mentioned are to credit him as the author of the Iliad. But also, people didn't really credit people the same way for writing stuff. The Iliad, if you saw at the beginning, the Iliad was probably being told a long time before it was even written down because of these rhapsodes. These people that would recite these epic poems, would perform them, and tell these stories. But the thing is, when you're telling it memorized, they're not going to have it word for word off the top of their head. So, as I was talking about, that's how we know. That's how we know these different versions of the Iliad existed. That's how we can track a lot of the language through time, is because of the tricks that these rhapsodes used to keep the story going. How did they even write these books? Well, it's been edited many times over the centuries. The text of the Iliad wasn't really stable until like 150 CE, if you were wondering. This was actually a huge debate in like the 1930s to 50s and before. People either assumed that like Homer was just a genius and he could do that. People were like, the Iliad is 15,000 lines long. How could anyone memorize all of that? First of all, humans can do some pretty wild stuff if they spend enough time on it. However, there's this guy named Milman Parry. He's dead now. And now Milman Parry is dead. I don't know if his wife did it. Nobody knows if his wife did it. Reportedly, he was traveling and he was taking clothes out of a suitcase, and apparently some of the clothes had a gun in it. And his wife said she heard a gunshot and like a groan, and then she went into the other room and he had shot himself in the chest. Some people say she did it. I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm not making any claims. I would not want to accuse someone of killing their husband if there's not really evidence of such. Like, that would suck. But he did some cool stuff before he died. He revolutionized the way that we study these ancient Greek epics. What Milman Parry discovered is that there were these, what he called formulas. These different versions of things like the Iliad were characterized by certain patterns of speech. So when a rhapsode was performing one of these poems, they didn't memorize it word for word. They knew the story and they were just able to like keep it in the poetic meter on the fly. That's what Milman Parry studied. He found that like in Yugoslavia, they had these practices that were very similar to the way that the ancient Greeks would have performed these poems. These epic poems were flexible in the way that they were performed. The meter of the poem is kind of its rhythm. Dactylic hexameter! That's okay, so you guys know Shakespeare. If you've ever heard anything about Shakespeare, you probably have heard of iambic pentameter. It is a form of poetic verse. Shakespeare is written in that rhythm because it works better with English. Dactylic hexameter is the meter that the Iliad is written in ancient Greek. In English, it doesn't always work. What is poetic justice? That is an entirely separate concept from poetic meter. If we bring back to Shakespeare, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. That's iambic pentameter. An iamb is a set of syllables that goes da-da, da-da. We can hear that in the shall I, da-da, compare, da-da, the two, da-da. Each of those is an iamb. Each like set of these kinds of syllables is called a foot. That actually works. Except my name doesn't really lend itself well to iambic pentameter, but that's a great example. Upon the dawn where soft light meets the day. See? It's like a heartbeat. That's why it's called iambic pentameter. Pentameter, penta means 5. So it is 5 iambs. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? They did the same thing in ancient Greek, but it wasn't iambic pentameter, it was dactylic hexameter, which is basically, so hex means 6. We have 6 syllabic feet, and usually it goes strong, weak, weak, strong, weak, weak. It's kind of like a waltz, I just noticed that. Were these formulas? So poets were, I mean, yes, what is rap but poetry? Words to a rhythm with rhyme? Yes. Anyway, so these formulas that Parry discovered, they were these like fixed verbal expressions that they would use to communicate the same idea in a different like number of syllables. Because if you have a set rhythm and number of syllables that you need to keep it in on one line, you might just need 2 more syllables today, but last time you needed 6 syllables. So the difference between like swift Achilles and quick-footed Achilles. Wait, swift Achilles is still 4 syllables. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not here to count, I'm here to talk about Greek mythology. My point is, swift-footed Achilles or swift or quick Achilles would have different rhythms and numbers of syllables. So they would mix and match these different expressions so that they would fit into the meter of the poem. I have an example, but I'm gonna use iambic pentameter because that's just easier in English. So, if I am a rhapsode, if I just use these lines from Shakespeare, like, what's in a name that which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, right? But if I'm a rhapsode and I'm doing all this off the top of my head, it's gonna be more flexible. Oral poetry, by nature, it has to be flexible. If I'm a rhapsode and I'm saying that part of the lines, maybe I wanna like be a little sillier tonight. And instead of what's in a name that which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, maybe I wanna say like, what's in a name? If I should call this rose a trash can, would not change its scent. That's still within the meter. So I have used different words, but it still fits the poetic metrical verse. So things like wine dark sea or rosy fingered dawn. In ancient Greek, these were some of those formulas. So that is one way that we have been able to try and see where edits have been made or when a text was actually written down, because we can see these formulas and they change over time. The thing is, the Iliad is almost certainly older than its first written version, because around 700, 800 BCE, the Greek alphabet suddenly started to get much more popular in ancient Greece. As the Greek alphabet became more widespread, people were more easily able to write things down, and so we see an explosion of written documents at that point in the historical record. That's what's going on here in the Iliad. Anyway, Greek mythology is happening, godly shenanigans, as always. The gods are always doing shenanigans. But Homer is not concerned with perfect historical accuracy. Homer is concerned with telling us a story. And as we are not in ancient Greece, you may be familiar with these Greek myths, but we're gonna get a little refresher because we have a lot of context to go over before we jump into the Trojan War, so that we know what's going on. And we're gonna start with the wedding of Thetis and Peleus. Anyone know who these people are? It's okay if you don't, because I'm gonna tell you about them. Peleus! Yes! He's a guy. His name is Peleus. Actually, things are looking up for him right now. It is the wedding of Thetis and Peleus. They're getting married, and it's Zeus's fault. But a Mount Olympus party, you guys! You have never been to a party like a Mount Olympus party. Nobody parties like the Olympian gods, because what else are a bunch of ultra-powerful immortals supposed to do? They literally just randomly, spontaneously start parties to hopefully cheer Zeus up when he's being scary. Were all the gods hot? Yes. Yes! That's how it's... Well, in ancient Greek, in like Attic Greek, it would be pronounced Thetis, probably. Something like that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And we're talking about this. So, they party hard. The Greek gods, they do. So, like, if they're just randomly throwing parties just because Zeus is in a bad mood and they don't want to deal with him chucking people off the mountain, when there is actually occasion to celebrate, like a wedding, yeah, they party hard. All the women that, most of them, if they weren't goddesses, I cannot think of, and that said, Zeus hooked up with a lot of women, so I don't know for sure. But I cannot think of a mortal that he hooked up with. I guess maybe Leda. I'm pretty sure she died. Because the thing is, if you hook up with Zeus, even if you don't know he's Zeus, even if he is in swan form, we'll talk about that. His wife is the goddess of marriage. She's gonna be really mad at you. You do not want the wrath of Hera following you around. Hercules, his Greek name is Heracles. It means the glory of Hera. Zeus named him that in hopes of cooling her rage that he cheated on her again. I'm the goddess of ADHD. There is a wedding on Mount Olympus. It is the party of the century. I don't know if this makes Thetis feel any better, because she's not really into this. Wait, that wasn't in the Disney film? Yeah, man! The Hercules Disney movie. Obviously, it's not historically accurate. It's not even mythologically accurate, because it's a children's movie. If they showed Zeus as he really is in Greek mythology, it would not be allowed to be shown to children. So, Peleus is a mortal. A mortal, not immortal. He is a king. The thing is, he is marrying the goddess Thetis. She's one of the Nereids, and she's probably the most prominent one. She is, of course, as goddesses are, just drop dead gorgeous. They talk about her hair a lot. They talk about Helen's hair more. She is either the silver-footed one or the swift-footed one or something. She is powerful as minor goddesses go. If I could stop getting distracted, I'd tell you about it. Yo, they talk about Helen's hair so much. So much. Everyone's obsessed with Helen's hair. She should shave her head like Britney Spears. I would not blame her one single bit. They're getting married, though. Peleus is the king of Thea, which Phthia. It's fine. We can just say it the English way, Thea. I'm gonna say Thea because I think it's funny. She is beautiful, even by goddess standards. Also, I have a list of the wedding gifts that Peleus got from the gods, if you're wondering. Hephaestus got Peleus a knife. Aphrodite got him a bowl, which was like engraved with an image of Eros. He's Cupid. He's Greek Cupid. Poseidon got him 2 horses, and they're like godly horses, I think. Poseidon is the god of horses. He made them up. And Athena got him a flute, and Nereus, his father-in-law, got him a basket of salt. It's divine salt. I'm still not entirely sure what it does, but it's apparently very fancy and divine. This is Peleus' second marriage, which I am saying for context. I place no judgment on this. If you're wondering, his first marriage ended with the death of his wife Antigone. We'll get more into that. And it is a Mount Olympus party. This is a feast for the ages. They party hard, even when there's no reason to party, because they're the gods. What else are they gonna do with their time? You know, make the world better? No. They're gonna party. It's not the happiest match, but Peleus, so this is his second marriage. His first one ended with the death by suicide of his first wife while he was off adventuring. He was one of the Argonauts. It isn't his first encounter with a Nereid, though, actually. Not his stepmother, but his father's affair partner was another one of the Nereids. So, like, literally Thetis' sister, back when his father, Aeacus, he had an affair with this other Nereid who was Psamathe. She has an asteroid named after her or something. If affair meant assaulted her even when she turned into a seal to try to escape him. Yep, that's Greek mythology. Anyway, so that resulted in Peleus and his brother Telamon having a half-brother who was named, I kid you not, it's not spelled the same way, but his name was Phocus. He was then killed, probably by Peleus and Telamon. Maybe it was an accident, maybe it was on purpose, sources vary. Some accounts say Aeacus himself did it because his wife was mad that he had an affair, to put it in the best possible light. And so he was like, look, I'll just get rid of him, no harm done, and just kills him. But most accounts say that it was Peleus and or Telamon, either by accident or not. Either way, their father blames them for it. Oh, also, they might have been jealous of Phocus because he was really good at athletics and stuff. Or again, it was an accident. Whatever it was, their father exiles them for it. He says, get out of my nation. This is your fault. Even if it wasn't. They kind of wander off separately. Peleus ends up at the court of Eurytion. Eurytion is the king of Thea at this moment in the story. Like, yes, Peleus is the king of Thea later, but for now, it's this dude. In ancient Greece. So if you were a king, you could, like, purify people of their sins and pardon them for their crimes. So if Peleus, in fact, was guilty of purposefully murdering his half-brother, Eurytion really likes him and is like, yes, I will absolve you of your crimes. I really like you. Do you want to marry my daughter, Antigone? Peleus is like, this went better than expected. Peleus is having a good time again. He's like, here, have a third of my kingdom. I do not know what Peleus did to make King Eurytion like him so much, but they are bros. He marries Antigone, and then the two of them get word that Jason is assembling a crew of heroes to go get the Golden Fleece. And so they're like, yo, we could be heroes. Oh, that's a song. Anyway, Peleus is like, bye, Antigone. Me and your dad are gonna go just sail away with Jason and find the Golden Fleece and be ancient Greek heroes, which always ends so well for everyone who does it. They go meet Jason. And when they get to the Argo, the ship, if you've read Percy Jackson, that's the ship that Leo named the Argo 2 after. So they get to the Argo. Guess who else is there? Telamon family reunion, kind of, except Telamon probably doesn't know at first that Eurytion is family, because, like, imagine you and your brother get kicked out, and then you find each other again, like, you just end up as co-workers on the Greek hero boat, and you're like, that's my brother, who's your friend? And he's like, this is my father-in-law, I got married and he gave me a third of his kingdom, I married his daughter. Like, what? Can you imagine how Telamon must have felt? Like, what did he even do during this time? I don't remember. I didn't really look. They do the thing. They do the Argonaut stuff, and they find the Golden Fleece. Yo! So they get the Golden Fleece, and they are vibing, and they are ancient Greek heroes. And then they hear the Caledonian boar is causing problems in Caledon. Oh no! So, the trio, I guess Telamon is just like, I'm just gonna stick with you guys, which, you know, that's his brother and his... Is it a father-in-law if you were the sibling of... Doesn't matter. So the Caledonian boar is this giant boar, and it's causing problems and tearing up the countryside of Caledon. So they go hunt the Caledonian boar with Atalanta of Winning Races fame, and they hunt the Caledonian boar to try and help the people of Caledon to not die from being gored by a boar. Unfortunately, tragedy strikes while they are hunting the Caledonian boar. Peleus accidentally kills his father-in-law too. I guess the kingdom's his now. I think it was an accident, but now he has to go seek absolution all over again because he killed another dude by accident or otherwise. So he heads off to another king. He goes to the king of Iolcus, whose name is Acastus. They were buddies on the Argo. This dude's an Argonaut too, and now he is a king of Iolcus. And Peleus is like, hey man, I accidentally killed another guy. I accidentally killed my father-in-law. Can you cleanse me of that sin? And Acastus is like, yeah man, absolutely. Come hang out at my place. His wife is not very nice. I don't think I even wrote her name down. Doesn't matter, because she's the worst, and Peleus dismembered her at some point for this. Acastus's wife is not very nice. She goes all Potiphar's wife, and was like, Joseph, do you wanna hook up? And Joseph was like, no. And then she was like, hey, he tried to hook up with me, and I escaped, but I tore this thing off of his clothes. And Potiphar believed his wife over a slave, even though his wife was totally lying. That's what Acastus's wife does. She's like, hey Peleus, you're very attractive. Would you like to do things that are inappropriate for me to do with another man as a married woman in an exclusive relationship with my husband? Clearly not that exclusive to her. Acastus's wife is like, hey, Peleus, do you want to put our Minecraft beds next to each other? And Peleus is like, no, I'm not like that. Your husband has been very nice to me. And also, he is married to Antigone, and he actually loves Antigone. So he's like, no, I'm married, you're married, we're not married to each other. Absolutely not. And so she accuses him of sexual assault. And also, she writes to Antigone that Peleus is no longer interested in being married to her, and it will instead be marrying one of Acastus's daughters. So, yeah, Acastus's wife is the worst, and Acastus believes her, but also Peleus is a guest, and guests are kind of sacred to Zeus in Greek mythology, especially right after you just absolved this dude of murder. Acastus is like, Peleus, hey, you want to go on a hike? And they wander up the mountain, and then Acastus just ditches him. But Peleus manages to get home and dismembers Acastus's wife for all of that. So he does dismember her for that, which, I mean, dismemberment is a lot, but also she just like went full crazy. You know, just a word to everybody in the world. Just because someone rejects your romantic advances does not mean you should ruin their life or hurt them in some way or any way. If you didn't know that, just a fun fact, if someone turns you down romantically, it's okay. They're allowed to do that. You are allowed to be like, all right, and move on to somebody who is interested. Don't be like Acastus's wife. If someone says, no thank you, I do not want to date and or kiss and or put my Minecraft bed next to yours. That's okay. You can still live a life, and they can too. If she hadn't done that, then I'm not saying that we should dismember people if they're mean to us. I'm not saying that. But I'm also saying she should not have done what she did. Unfortunately, the letter reached Antigone. Antigone believed it and has taken her own life, which means Peleus is widowed. But he's getting remarried to Thetis, who is not that into him. This has not been an easy, I don't know if you could even call it a courtship, because she really didn't want to marry him in the first place. So he just had to repeatedly chase down and capture her as she kept taking on different forms, from like animals to literal fire. But Peleus is a persistent guy, and he's kind of experienced at wrestling powerful women, because he did lose a wrestling match to Atalanta back in the Caledonian War times, if you recall. Atalanta is another Greek myth. She was super athletic, and she kept beating guys at athletic games. And there were a bunch of dudes who were super into this, and they were like, marry me, and she was like, only if you can beat me in a foot race, and all of them lost, except for one dude who got some golden apples. That'll be another problem later. Not this dude specifically, but golden apples. He got some golden apples and he kept throwing them to distract her. And that's how he won. Anyway, so Peleus did lose that wrestling match. But he is eventually victorious over Thetis, even when she turned into literal fire, because I think it was Chiron was like, hey, no matter what she turns into, you just gotta like hold on to her tighter. And eventually Thetis is just like, fine. And either is like, yeah, let's get married, or is like, I cannot escape. I give up. So she's not really into this either, but this is ancient Greece. They're still getting married because Zeus said so. So neither of them can really get out of it. This was arranged by the king of the gods himself. Most stories say that it was because, so Thetis, like I said, is beautiful even by goddess standards. Naturally, Zeus is being Zeus, but also Poseidon. Zeus and Poseidon, they both wanted to date Thetis. Date, whatever. I'm using modern vernacular. Both wanted to get with her. Zeus, even though he's married, but that is not a surprise. However, they then found out that there is a prophecy that Thetis' son will be greater than his father. I don't know if y'all know this, but like, Zeus is the king of the gods because he overthrew his father. Also, they are two of the most powerful Olympian gods. So, if one of them had a baby with Thetis, and this prophecy came about where her son is supposed to be greater than his father, that might cause some serious issues for the world, or for, Zeus's place as king of the gods. They keep trying to overthrow him, probably because he's a jerk. Anyway, Zeus is like, yo, this is the one thing that will stop me from hooking up with a woman, is if the potential love child threatens my place as king of the gods. I guess there are limits to Zeus. So he was like, you know what? If this prophecy is a thing, I'm not messing with a prophecy. I think I'm just gonna marry Thetis off to a nice mortal man. Then any children will be manageable. Thetis, of course, has no say in this. However, another version of it in the Cypria, which is kind of like the prequel to the Iliad, but it's lost to time. We have a few fragments of it, but reportedly it was kind of a prequel, probably written after the Iliad, because according to people who got to read it when it wasn't lost, it specifically mentions events from the Iliad, as prequels do, be like, oh, this is coming up, like foreshadowing. The Cypria says that Zeus did just try to get with Thetis, but Thetis had been raised with Hera, Zeus's wife, the goddess of marriage, as a mentor. Not only did she respect Hera, but also had been raised to not be a homewrecker by Hera. And so Thetis turned Zeus down, and Zeus was like, fine, you can marry a mortal then. And so this is just a punishment. Either way, she's marrying Peleus. Hera is the goddess of marriage. She also happens to have the biggest philanderer in existence for a husband. Okay, I'm not saying that Hera was right to, just bring doom upon all of Zeus's love children. I can understand her frustration, though. He's the god of the sky and thunderstorms and such. Sky god. The name Zeus probably actually comes from that Proto-Indo-European root word that just meant like sky god. So things like how in Latin the word for god is theos, or the word deity, or actually the name of quite a few gods. That's a really, really, really old word root, and Zeus's name probably comes from it too. But yeah, if that part in Hercules, and then along came Zeus, he hurled his thunderbolt. That part, yeah, that part's accurate. That's like the only part that's accurate to Greek mythology in Disney's Hercules. So yeah, Thetis in this version was like, no thank you, and Zeus was like, fine, I didn't like you anyway. You know, he just, when you get that one kind of DM. Anyway, there are many ways we are attested to have arrived here. But the point is, we are at the wedding of Peleus and Thetis. I almost said Thisbe because Peleus sounds like Pyramus. Pyramus and Thisbe is sort of a diet Romeo and Juliet that appears in one of Shakespeare's earlier plays. So, the wedding. This is a major event, even by Olympian standards. This is the party to end all parties. At least until the next time the Olympians have a massive party. Everyone has been invited. Everybody's here. Except for one person who was not invited. It is Eris, the goddess of strife, the goddess of discord, and I'm not talking about the messaging system, the goddess of contention. She is the goddess of petty fights on the internet. You know, I understand the reasoning in not wanting to invite her, considering that she sows anger everywhere she goes. That's her job. She's quite good at her job. But she's not really happy that she was excluded from this party. So naturally, she crashes it. But she doesn't just like show up and look better than everybody else. Like, look what you're missing out on. Aren't you lucky I still showed up and then stole the wedding gifts? Like, no. She slips in, ruins the party, slips out. How does she ruin the party, you ask? The golden apple. I told you we would get to this. The golden apple. This is one of the golden apples from the garden of the Hebrides. They have a garden, and there's some golden apples. The golden apples are dope. Eris has one. Upon it, she has inscribed just one word, because in ancient Greek, it's only one word. Kaliste, which in ancient Greek means to the most beautiful. I'm going to explain the linguistics of that now. Thank you. It's the dative feminine singular of Kallistos, which it's the superlative form. So good, the superlative form of good is best. The superlative form of tall is tallest, like senior superlatives, if you got voted about that in high school. The word kalos means beautiful or good quality even, or noble, but I think in this sense it means beautiful. It's one word in ancient Greek. All of those cases, like I said, the declensions are insane. It's one word. Because of the dative form, it means to. Like the dative form, we don't really have it in English. It would be like, I sent a letter to my sibling, right? So the sibling would be in the dative case. Not that anyone probably cares, but I care, because words are cool. Anyway, so it's also in the feminine form, which, again, we don't get this in English. It specifically is addressed to one single woman. So if anyone ever asks you, why didn't they just share the apple? It's because it was specifically addressed by that word. That word indicates that it is to one woman, one goddess. So there's the apple. Well, naturally, people start fighting over the apple. Specifically, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Really, I thought Athena was smarter than this. I thought she would be above all of the petty stuff. But no, she wants the apple too. Like I said, the dative form indicates that this object is to the most beautiful. Hera, Athena, Aphrodite all catch sight of the apple. And, you know, personally, if they were more considerate, they could have given the apple to Thetis, who is already being married off to someone she's not really that into. Like, who doesn't want to feel beautiful on their wedding day? I think that would have been a very nice gesture, but no, this is Mount Olympus. The word to the most, yeah. Yes, exactly, Mark. Eris is playing 4D chess, but it's not actually that hard, because all she has to do is start some stupid petty fight over who's the prettiest. They really make her job easy. This could be considered the catalyst for the entire Trojan war. Just this little apple. It is a golden apple. But they're gods! They have ambrosia. So they don't give it to Thetis because they don't care about her, I guess. They don't care about her feelings. Why would they care about her feelings? The goddesses don't care about your feelings. Also, it's not like Eris didn't know that this would start drama. That's her whole job. She's the goddess of strife. Her job is to start petty arguments. And she just started the pettiest argument in all of Greece forever. The three goddesses start arguing about to whom the apple is addressed. Like, which of them is the prettiest. They're goddesses, they're all very pretty. But they're ruining the party. And I don't know what Eris would have done if she had been invited, but she wasn't, and so now this is ruining the party. And Zeus is like, oh, Zeus, you are no better, hush. But it's kind of his job to make them stop because he is kind of the king of the gods. Like, the buck stops there. Okay, the buck doesn't really stop with Zeus because he passes the buck. Obviously, he can't judge this debate. Like, they don't even end this argument by being like, clearly someone is just trying to mess with us, and if they're not, this is a jerk move anyway. Zeus is like, well, I guess we gotta decide who the prettiest is. They're the literal gods, and yet they don't rise above this pettiness. They're like, well, I guess we gotta figure out who the prettiest is. Zeus can't judge this. He's Zeus, and also he's married to Hera. Not that he cares, but instead of being like, you guys are better than this, you are literally goddesses. Zeus is like, I guess we gotta get someone to decide who is the prettiest, because clearly I'm not an impartial judge. One of them is his daughter, one of them is his wife, one of them is like his aunt, maybe? Okay, so Aphrodite, if you haven't heard, was born from sea foam. However, that sea foam... You remember how I said that Zeus and the other Olympians, like, became the Olympians by overthrowing their evil Titan dad? Not that they're not evil sometimes, but... So, their Titan dad, Cronus, did the same thing to Uranus, his dad, who was the sky. And when he defeated Uranus, he castrated him, and the disembodied parts fell into the sea and became sea foam. And from that, Aphrodite was born. So, in a sense, she is the last child of Uranus. That would make her like Zeus's aunt or something. I don't know. The Olympian family tree is really weird. So, he's like, Hermes, take these three to Mount Ida. There is someone there who will be an impartial judge. He has a good reputation. The judge that Zeus has chosen is a young man who is totally minding his own business. He's just this shepherd dude. And suddenly the gods drag him into their drama because they can't handle their feelings, I guess. But he is handsome and strong, and he has a reputation for being intelligent and fair. He is an excellent shepherd. In fact, his name itself means the man who repels enemies. He defends the sheep and the herds of sheep very well. His name is Alexandros, but you might know him better by his first name, Paris. It is unrelated etymologically to the capital of France. That is named after the Parisii, which is a Gallic tribe. They just happen to be the same word when you put them into English. If you were wondering, I checked. Different Alexander! Different Alexander! We're just gonna call him Paris, because that's what everybody else calls him. Paris, though, was not born to shepherds. He was born to King Priam and his wife Hecuba, who are the rulers of Troy. Why is he shepherding? I will tell you. So, just before he was born, when his mom was pregnant with him, literally the day before he was born, she had a nightmare that she gave birth to a firebrand or a burning piece of wood that then destroyed all of Troy. Dream logic. However, they were like, yo, that's a weird dream, and one of their soothsayers was like, yeah, that baby's probably gonna destroy the whole city. You should probably get rid of it. Also, Cassandra, another one of their daughters, you might remember her as the prophetess that nobody ever believes. She and her twin brother, Helenus, both do. They both had the gift of prophecy. Maybe because when they were babies, they were left in the temple of Apollo overnight and some snakes licked their ears. I don't know how that gave them the gift of prophecy, but now they have it. She also prophesied this. She was screaming about it, but no one believed her because she's Cassandra. Because Apollo was like, hey, you want to hook up? And Cassandra was like, no, thank you. And Apollo was like, fine, no one will ever believe your prophecy then anyway. I'm the god of prophecy. And walked away. Helenus probably did hook up with Apollo, so he's not cursed. Paris, his parents were like, yo, That does sound pretty bad. So after the baby was born, they gave baby Paris to a servant and were like, just leave him outside, expose him, not like cancel him, as in someone dies of exposure. Expose him, leave him on the ground so that he just dies because he's a baby and he can't do anything about it. The servant's like, oh, okay. And he takes the baby to Mount Ida and is like, and then he comes back 5 days later. I don't know if he just, morbid curiosity or if he was gonna go like, I don't know, give the body a proper burial. That's a big deal in ancient Greece. The baby's still alive. He was nursed by a she-bear. A bear just was like, that's a baby. I'm gonna take care of this baby. And so the servant is like, I think maybe it's the will of the gods that this child live. So he adopts the baby and raises him as his own. I guess he just quit his job being a servant to the king, and he was just like, I'm gonna just raise this kid. Whether he actually felt bad for the kid, or whether he was just like, yo, if he's still alive, the gods definitely want him alive, and I don't want to tick them off. He was just raised as a shepherd. He doesn't even know he's a prince. He's just been vibing. He's an excellent shepherd. He also is married. If you didn't know, nobody really talks about this. He is married to a nymph named Oenone. Her name is spelled O-E-N-E-N-E. That one was fun. Anyway, Oenone. Paris is already married to Oenone. She is a nymph. She is, I think, the daughter of like a river spirit. And they are married, except she also has a gift of prophecy, which sometimes worries Paris because like she keeps prophesying that he is destined to leave her for another woman, which for the 40th time, he has no intention of doing. Oenone, please stop talking about this really depressing stuff. You are making the sheep sad. But she has the gift of prophecy. She knows. I feel really bad for her. He already has one. He's married. Some accounts say they already have a child. Anyway, he's pretty content with his life, I imagine, the day that 4 gods show up and demand he judge their impromptu beauty contest. Olympians don't play fair. Mortals are basically ants to them. Whatever. Now, sometimes they get really attached to the ants, but that's, we'll get there. Anyway, so Zeus was like, this guy has a reputation for being like fair and impartial. He will judge fairly. Apparently, there was never any intention to make this a fair contest because all 3 goddesses try to bribe him. Like openly, they don't even care. Like, if you genuinely wanted to know who is the most beautiful, why are you trying to bribe him? That just makes it a contest of who can guess best what this random mortal shepherd man wants. It's not even about who's the most beautiful. Why are you even doing this then? The apple says to the most beautiful, not to the one who can make the best guess what the shepherd Paris wants. What's the point? What is the point if you're just gonna bribe him? But they do! Because, like I said, the gods don't play fair. They could have not been petty and stayed up at the party and enjoyed a nice wedding feast and felt bad for Thetis. It doesn't matter. They're acting ugly on the inside. I'm just so disappointed, especially in Athena. She's literally the goddess of wisdom. I thought she knew better than this. But no! So they all try to bribe Paris. Athena offers him strength beyond all other mortals and proficiency in every skill imaginable. He will be the greatest warrior of all time. Achilles can go live his obscure life because now we got Paris. Hera offers him unfathomable riches and dominion over all of the kingdoms of Europe and Asia. Aphrodite smiles and offers him the love of Helen of Sparta. Which, like, if you don't know this story, that seems like a really stupid bribe. He's already married to a woman, reportedly, that he really likes. But apparently, the prophecies were right. And apparently, he forgot all of the prophecies because he picks Aphrodite. You have a wife and a child, Paris? He's like, huh? Helen of Sparta. Helen of Sparta. I'm so disappointed in everyone in this story. Except maybe Oenone, maybe Thetis. Almost everyone. No one acts right on Mount Olympus. Picked being the greatest warrior? Well, you wouldn't have started the Trojan War. I thought he was happy with his life, but apparently not. He could have been the world's greatest warrior, or the world's greatest craftsman, whatever his passion is. He could have been king of like 75% of the known world then. Nope. Hot girl. Hot girl above all else. Helen. To be fair, Helen of Sparta is not just some lady. She is the most beautiful woman in the world. Whatever. Hot girl above all else. All right, Paris. Whatever. At least they're not fighting anymore. So next time, we will talk about Helen of Sparta. I said I was going to talk about Helen. Okay, we're going to talk about the Iliad. I got distracted, but only for 37 minutes. And we're going to talk about Helen of Troy. Did she have hot sisters? Well, I feel like, she did have a sister, Clytemnestra. So that's actually where we're going. So we got to the judgment of Paris, right? That's why it's Troy's story, because in the original Greek text, Troy is not called Troy, it's called Ilium, the Iliad, the story of Troy, Troy's story. A prince named, yes, Paris in Romeo and Juliet is the person Juliet was arranged to marry, but she married Romeo in secret instead. And then everybody died. There are a lot of hot people in Greek mythology. That's why we're talking about Helen. So, Helen, origin story. She is the daughter of Zeus. Because again, the cardinal rule of Greek mythology, Zeus simply cannot keep himself from hooking up with every woman he fancies. Except for Thetis. Helen of Troy, yes. So she is not yet Helen of Troy. At the moment, she is Helen of Sparta, because she's not in Troy yet. She is a princess. The king of this land is called Tyndareus. Anyway, she is the daughter, not of Tyndareus, but, Zeus isn't exactly paying child support. So, she is the daughter of Zeus and Leda, or Leda. Was Sparta called Mycenae? Well, the Iliad is not completely historically accurate. There was a city of Troy, it seems, with crazy strong walls, like are said to have in the Iliad. However, that Troy fell around 1200 BCE. So the Iliad, the story of it, has some anachronisms. They mention temples to the gods, which did not start being constructed until 400 years after that. Take it all with a grain of salt. So yes, the IRL Troy probably fell in 1200 BCE, but the Iliad is a story. So it's probably has these anachronisms either because the author just didn't know, they didn't have Google back then, or these elements were added to make it more relatable to the audience that they were telling this to. Anyway, so Paris picks Aphrodite. So, Helen, the most beautiful woman, the face that launched 1,000 ships. She is the daughter of Zeus and Leda. Leda's actual husband is Tyndareus, the king of Sparta. She has twin brothers and a sister. But the thing is, when Zeus appeared to Leda in the form of a swan, accounts vary on exactly how consensual all this was. But Zeus appeared to her in the form of a swan. Some say that, as a swan, he pretended to be fleeing from some kind of predator. What kind of predators do swans have? And just, flew into her arms. I guess he stayed a swan. I don't know. I feel like if I start asking questions about Zeus's various affairs, it's only going to make me more confused. But she gets pregnant from Zeus. She also is intimate with her husband Tyndareus that same day. And so this is a real medical phenomenon. 4 children come from this union. Helen, and it varies which one of the twins, Castor and Pollux. One of them is usually the son of Zeus, and one of them is the son of Tyndareus. Clytemnestra, Helen's twin sister, is the daughter of Tyndareus. So we have 1 pregnancy, 2 dads. That's a real thing that can happen, having a single pregnancy, but, twins, I don't know if I've ever heard of a case of it being quadruplets, because quadruplets are pretty rare medically anyway. The more babies are in there, the more difficult it's going to be for everybody, because that's a lot of babies. Anyway, it's called heteropaternal superfecundation. And it has happened to real humans. The part that has not happened to real humans, as far as I know, is that she laid eggs. Helen and Clytemnestra hatched out of one, and Castor and Pollux hatched out of another. But, the ancient Greeks don't really have the best record of understanding how the reproductive tract works. Melampus and his moving uterus and female hysteria, and for the record, the uterus does not move around the body. If that was not clear. it doesn't do that. It stays in place. So he picks Aphrodite. Now we have Helen and the eggs. So Helen grows up to be the most beautiful woman in the world. Also, at one point, this is why we hate Theseus. Theseus, the guy who slayed the Minotaur or whatever, he's the worst. He literally kidnapped Helen when she was a child. Sources vary. I've heard as young as 7. Others say 10 to 12. Others don't say an age, but say that she bore him a daughter. Theseus is disgusting. Also, he's also a son of Zeus, which, you know, as Percy Jackson made clear, it's not incest if you're demigods. That was literally his plan, though. He and his buddy were like, yo, we're demigods. Let's go hook up with some other demigods. Helen was like 7! Not okay. Theseus is the worst. All my homies hate Theseus. So I just wanted to note that, because Theseus, you know, I don't care if he killed the Minotaur. He's the worst. And people don't really talk about him doing that. But pretty much all sources said that Theseus kidnapped Helen when she was very young and likely abused her. Gods don't have DNA, according to Percy Jackson. I get all my biology knowledge from the Percy Jackson series. Do the gods age? They are immortal. They do, so they are depicted as different ages sometimes. For example, Dionysus, god of wine and revelry and masks? And theater. I did a report on this when I was in theater school. But he is, and this was not part of the report, I learned this from a different YouTube video. But Dionysus, for example, is portrayed in a lot of art of him as either this like energetic curly-haired youth when they want to invoke a more like party spirit, or he is depicted as an old man with a beard, which was kind of the image of like a wise philosopher. So depending on whether they wanted to evoke a sense of his revelry god stuff, or whether they wanted him to be like a more calm kind of paternal figure, they would depict him differently, and they did this with a lot of gods. I'm very gullible. State can hear you. Good! Everybody learn about Greek mythology right now. Eventually, after they get her back from Theseus, which her twin brothers go and retrieve her, which wouldn't that make them like 7 years old too? Whatever. They have their own mythology attached to them, but they basically sack the city of Sparta and take her back and depose Theseus and put a different guy in the leadership position of Athens. So at some point, you know, this is ancient Greece, a girl needs to get married, a respectable princess needs to get married to somebody. So naturally, Helen has a lot of suitors. I made a table. I copied and pasted a table. There are several different accounts of who came to try and win Helen's hand, but there are only 7 that, like, all 3 of the sources that I have in the table agreed on. Hesiod lists 12, Apollodorus lists 31, and Hyginus lists 36. So, like, imagine being, I don't know, like 18 at best, and your dad's like, all right, we gotta get you married. Let's see who is interested. And just like 36 dudes just show up at your house. It's like that one episode of H2O, Just Add Water, where Cleo accidentally becomes a siren. That was weird. Anyway, so the 7 that all 3 sources agree on, though, are Ajax the Great, as opposed to Ajax the Lesser, which, like, they're both in this, and I just feel really bad for Ajax the Lesser. Like, imagine there's a dude with the same name as you, and you are differentiated by the fact that he is cooler than you. Cancel Theseus! Cancel him yesterday. He's also known as Telamonian Ajax. Telamon is the brother of Peleus, Thetis's husband. So he is Peleus's nephew. Telamon was also one of the Argonauts. So his kid is Ajax, and he was also trained by Chiron, like Achilles. Chiron the centaur. Like in Percy Jackson, Chiron is a special centaur, though. So, you know, a centaur is it's half horse, half human, right? I think they appear in Harry Potter. Anyway, so Chiron is a special centaur. The rest of them, I guess, are like his kids, but he was made a centaur. His name, Chiron, means like good with his hands. He's a surgeon. He's trained a lot of heroes. Achilles. Also, he trained a bunch of the characters in this as well, including Peleus. And so, yeah, Ajax the Great, or Telamonian Ajax, is Peleus' nephew, which makes him Achilles' cousin. I know how this works. Another guy is Eliphenor. He's not really in a lot of mythology. He's actually the one that I couldn't find a lot of information on. His dad is a king, so now he is king because his dad was killed by Amphitryon. Then there's Menelaus, the guy who became king of Athens when they deposed Theseus for being a disgusting predator. He's not super heroic. He gets a little skittish in battle, but he is an excellent strategist. Nobody can arrange troops like him, so he's smart. Then there's Odysseus. Yes, he brought no gifts. He didn't really expect to win Helen's hand in the first place, but he did help out the king and thus marry Penelope. We'll talk about that in a second. Then there is Philoctetes. You might remember that name from Disney's Hercules as the satyr that trained Hercules. Oh, also Chiron trained Hercules, not in the Disney movie. He's a person in this and not a very sassy and irritable satyr. So Philoctetes is like maybe the greatest archer in Greece. He's a really good bowman. And it doesn't hurt that he has the bow and arrows of Heracles. Heracles is dead by this point, maybe deified. I don't know. As the story, there are a few stories, as always, because it's ancient Greek mythology. But the biggest one I read was Heracles, Heracles is his Greek name. It means the glory of Hera. Zeus named him that in hopes that she would be less mad that he cheated on her again. It did not work. Anyway, so Heracles has been poisoned, and he knows he's gonna die, but because he's Heracles, he builds his own funeral pyre, and then just lays down on it, and he's like, someone light my funeral pyre, and Philoctetes did it, and so in gratitude for setting him on fire, Heracles gave him his bow and arrows, and so now Philoctetes is an excellent archer. I think he already did archery, but now he has the bow and arrows of Heracles. All of this is in writing. Yes, it's Greek mythology. I mean, all of this is in writing because I took notes. But, like, this is part of Greek mythology. And there are a lot of, like I said, this is really ancient stories. A lot of these were probably not original to the Iliad because Homer doesn't really expand a ton upon them, which suggests that he figured his audience would already know the stories. So, like the Judgment of Paris. He just kind of glosses over that because the story probably predates the Iliad. People already knew these. These were their folk tales. It's kind of like how these days everybody knows the basic story of like Hansel and Gretel or Cinderella, right? These were their folk tales. Anyway, and then there is Protesilaus, who is, he's most famous for the way he died. His name probably wasn't even Protesilaus, like his given name, if he existed. Again, this is mythology. It comes from the Greek word for first. He originally was probably named Iolaus, but then he was the first person to die when the Greeks sat down at Troy. And so now he is just Protesilaus because he was the first one to get killed. A lot of these, like, are really... I feel bad for them. These are the legacies they left. I'm, trying to keep it somewhat delicate, but it's Greek mythology. What do the Greeks actually consider their history? I mean, if we want to just consider the history of Greece itself, like I said, they didn't really, at this point, consider themselves all Greeks. First of all, ancient Greece was largely made up of a bunch of city-states. Like, people didn't consider themselves ancient Greeks. They were Athenians or Spartans or Corinthians. But, like, the Minoans, the Mycenaeans, and then into the Greek Dark Ages, followed by classical Greece. And then, last but not least, definitely not least, is Menelaus. And he's the one that ultimately wins Helen's hand. And he is of the cursed bloodline of Tantalus. I don't know if you guys have heard of Tantalus. He is long dead and being tortured in the underworld by now. Long story short, he did some bad stuff, and his punishment, we get the word tantalizing from his name, because in the underworld, he is cursed to stand in this beautiful clear pool of water with a fruit tree hanging temptingly right in front of him, but anytime he tries to drink the water or eat the fruit, it ends up just out of his grasp. So he's just cursed to be hungry and thirsty forever. So close, yet so far. Bummer! Don't cannibalize your own children. Menelaus is descended from him. As far as I can tell, Menelaus has not committed any cannibalism yet, though he did talk his brother Agamemnon into sacrificing his own daughter Iphigenia for winds favorable enough to sail to Troy for the Trojan War. Menelaus is the one that gets married to Helen. But not yet. They haven't picked yet. As you can imagine, this is a pretty major undertaking, especially considering Helen is the most beautiful woman in the world. She's already been kidnapped once. The point is, Tyndareus is like, I really don't want people to start a war over this. A lot of dudes just showed up at my house to try and marry my daughter, and a lot of them are pretty accomplished warriors. I may be in a bit deep here, and Odysseus is like, I have an idea. If I can marry your niece, I will tell you what my idea is. And so Tyndareus is like, yeah, whatever, okay. And so Odysseus is out of the running at least. Well, depends on the account. In one account, she does choose him. In a lot of them, Tyndareus chooses for her. So the amount of choice Helen actually has in pretty much all of this is very much up for debate, and has been very passionately debated by a lot of historical scholars, apparently. There are letters, apparently, from antiquity where these dudes were like, are you stupid? Of course it happened like this. And it's like, I'm just trying to read the Greek mythology, man. So my point is, Tyndareus is like, I really do not want to start a war over this. Like, I just want to marry my daughter off and be done with it. Anyway, so Odysseus is like, I have an idea as to how to keep this from causing war. If I can marry your niece Penelope, I will tell it to you. So Tyndareus is like, yeah, okay. No word on what Penelope, how she feels about this. Oh, however, by the way, though, Tyndareus has been cursed by Aphrodite because one time he was sacrificing to the gods and he forgot Aphrodite, so she cursed him that his daughters would gain fame for being adulterous. The gods will meddle however they want. So the point is, Odysseus is like, here's what we do. We have all of the suitors swear an oath to defend Helen's union with whoever ends up winning her hand. Everybody has to swear an oath that they will be cool about it and they will defend the suitor you or Helen, depending on the account, picks. This is known as the Oath of Tyndareus. And, you know, honor was a pretty important thing back then, so this was a significant commitment for them to make. Like, this is a pretty solid protection, hopefully, against starting a war. We call that foreshadowing. We all know how it goes, but just for here. So they all swear an oath to be cool about whoever she ends up marrying, even if it's not them, and to defend that union. And just everybody has to cooperate, even if you don't get to marry Helen. Okay, so they all swear this oath, and they agree on their honor that they will stay on the same side. There is one account that I found where Helen did choose Menelaus of her own free will, because, you know, there's not a lot of women's rights going on here. Maybe of her own free will. Anyway, Apollodorus, though, says that Odysseus knew Menelaus would win Helen's hand because Menelaus is the richest. That's usually how politics go. So, Menelaus wins, and he gets to marry Helen. You know who isn't there trying to win her hand, though? Achilles. He's actually probably a little young for that at this point, but he is minding his own business. So Achilles, again, if you recall at the beginning, we were talking about Peleus and Thetis and their wedding, and Thetis wasn't really into it, but Zeus kind of made her do it. Anyway, they do have kids. Achilles is one of them, their youngest, of 7. The other 6 did not survive infancy. That's pretty much Thetis' fault. She's kind of struggling with the whole, like, living in the mortal world thing, being married to a mortal man thing. Like, Peleus seems like a decent dude, by some accounts. Even if he is nice to her, though, she's a goddess. Her world is just so very different from Peleus's. Even if he is a king, he is immortal. He doesn't get it. They're just having trouble relating. She does love her children. Maybe. She might also just be a little morbidly curious because her children don't seem to be immortal like she is. So she does a little science. Do you guys remember what Achilles is most famous for? The heel? The Achilles tendon, which, funnily enough, Achilles, the story of Achilles himself seems to, like, be much older than the whole heel thing. The heel thing is a later addition to the story, but I'm still going to talk about it. You guys have all heard the story of how he was dipped in the river Styx as a baby, and the reason that his heel was the vulnerable spot was because she, like, held him by his heel. Find my baby goat, I'll show you. So imagine this is a human baby. You just hold him by the ankle and you dunk him in the river. Don't do that. Babies do instinctively hold their breath if you put them underwater. I don't know how we know this. I did not find out personally. Apparently that is the case. That would be evolutionarily advantageous. The point is, babies do instinctively hold their breath underwater, so if it's a quick dip, don't do that. But, like, she didn't drown him. If she was dipping him in the river, why would she not just get her arms wet? You're a goddess. You're a sea goddess, Thetis. I know it's the river Styx, but if you're willing to put an infant in there, just dunk him in all the way. I don't understand any of Thetis's logic here, because by other accounts, she didn't dip him in the Styx. She either wanting to make them immortal or like try and figure out why they were mortal despite being her children. Maybe it was the fact that their father was mortal. She does a little science and puts the babies not in a river but in the fireplace. She just sticks them in the coals and just leaves them in there, and then during the day, she anoints them with ambrosia, the food of the gods. Again, some say she was trying to make them immortal. Some say she was just trying to figure out why they were not immortal. Some say she was just really bad with childcare. Still, you think that's like basic childcare is do not put them in the fire. Yeah, bun in the oven. So the first 6 apparently died from this until she was doing it to Achilles, and finally Peleus walks in and is like, "Oh my gods, what are you doing with the baby?" And like scoops up Achilles out of the fireplace, and he only suffered a burned heel. Thetis was so offended by him being like, "Don't set our baby on fire," that she just left. She was like, "I can't do this anymore. I'm done with this marriage," and went back to the ocean and never returned. Peleus is like, "All right, I guess I'm a single dad now." He also has to run a kingdom, so that's when he gets Chiron involved. Chiron trained him too. He also trained Jason, and he trained a bunch of other guys whose names you might not recognize, but they all start with A. Aristeus, who is a son of Apollo, and he eventually became a god of, like, beekeeping and cheese making and basically just like cottagecore stuff. Actaeon, who did not fare so well in his career, he accidentally saw Artemis naked and got turned into a stag and then ripped apart by his own hunting dogs. Bummer. And then Asclepius, he ended up being the god of medicine. He was also a son of Apollo. He was so good at medicine that he figured out how to bring people back from the dead. Hades didn't like this and complained to Zeus and was like, "This dude keeps stealing all of my dead people." And so Zeus just straight up killed Asclepius. And then in most accounts brought him back to life as the god of doctors. But Achilles is the best warrior. Quote, "When Achilles reached the age at which children need wagons and knuckle bones, Chiron accustomed him to small javelins, darts, and race courses. Achilles also had a small ashen spear hewn by Chiron, and he seemed to babble about military affairs." So this kid is maybe not born a warrior, but they pretty quickly put him into that. I mean, to be fair, he did survive being put in the fire. When he appeared to yield to anger, Chiron taught him music. Music was enough to tame the readiness and rising of his disposition. Without exertion, he thoroughly learned the musical modes, and he sang to the accompaniment of a lyre. So in ancient Greece, they didn't have the same scales we do today. They had a bunch of other ideas, because before we got our Western 12-note scale, the thing about notes is they are just different sound frequencies, and so they divided them up differently in ancient Greece, and apparently it was actually quite a debate for a while. My point is, Achilles is a good singer, and also a war machine. Achilles is like a toddler. Chiron does not give him toys. Chiron gives him weapons. He's like, "Here, are you bored, Achilles? Here, take this sword." A later source does say that Achilles' boyfriend Patroclus was also trained by Chiron. Homer says he wasn't, though. It doesn't really matter. I just was gonna tell you the fun trivia about Chiron's school for demigods and heroes. So, unfortunately, and this is also important to the Iliad, Achilles has been prophesied to have one of 2 paths he can pick, by many accounts. He can either live a long but obscure life and just, it's a long life, but it might be kind of dull. He's not gonna live in the legends forever. Or he can live a short but glorious life. I think we all know which one he picked. Thetis does not like this. So she hears about this prophecy. She skidoos him off to the island of Skyros, dressed as a girl, so that he can be hidden among the daughters of King Lycomedes. And then, when the Trojan Wars, people are recruiting, he won't get recruited and die in battle. Or Peleus sent him there to avenge the death of Theseus by King Lycomedes. Kind of a reverse Mulan. It kind of is! Anyway, Theseus tried to steal the guy's kingdom, so it was justified. Anyway, so the problem with sending Achilles off to Skyros is that the Greek warriors also have a prophecy that they need Achilles with them to win the Trojan War. So, shenanigans. They dress up as traveling salesmen and hop off to Skyros. I don't know how they know he's there, but among their wares as traveling salesmen, they casually have some weapons, among other things, knowing that Achilles was literally given weapons instead of toys as a child. So he's definitely, like, if anything's gonna get his attention, it's the weapons. They're absolutely right. The princesses are, like, looking through the available products, and Achilles is just immediately like, ooh, bow and arrow. And the Greeks are like, we knew it! You're Achilles! And he's like, ah, you got me! Let's go fight the Trojans! And that's the pretend he's like, apparently that's what happens. Odysseus outsmarts everybody again. Also, apparently while he was on Skyros, he had a child, maybe married, one of the daughters. Her name was Datamaya, if you were wondering. And their kid was named Neptolemus. Yeah, Neptolemus. I guess he just goes off with the Greeks and is like, bye! Lot of just, like, ditching our wives to go do Trojan War stuff in this story. So that's what Achilles is up to. Meanwhile, back to Troy. So shortly after the whole beauty contest, you guys remember Paris. He's still here. He gets some more life-changing news after the whole beauty contest thing, when some servants of the king of Troy, Priam, come to Mount Ida, where Paris lives and has been shepherding with Oenone. I don't know where she is at this point. Was he just like, oh man, I already have a wife. That's gonna suck. She was right. But some servants of King Priam, his real dad, come to Mount Ida to get a bull, which that bull is going to be the prize for some athletic games. The Greeks, like most humans, loved competition. The bull they select, however, is Paris's favorite one. He's like, that's my favorite bull. And they're like, sucks. King said get a bull, bye. And so Paris is like, I'm just gonna go win those games and get my pet bull back. Turns out, he does, actually, win the games. He totally owns his long-lost brothers at archery, and one of them is so mad about it that he wants to kill Paris, but Paris manages to escape to, like, the temple of Zeus and claim sanctuary there, which pauses things long enough for Cassandra to be like, yo, I think that's the baby our parents left to be abandoned on the mountain. I guess they believe her this time. She had already, even before the dream that Paris's mother had about him destroying Troy, she was already prophesying about this. Cassandra's like, yo, that's our long-lost brother, and he's a grown man now, so I guess Priam is like, well, I guess the gods wanted him to live, and adopts him, claims him as his son. And so then Paris is like, all right, I guess I don't have to go back to Oenone. But now he's a prince! We love that! Which allows him to travel off to Sparta on a diplomatic mission. Guess who's in Sparta? Helen, with her husband, Menelaus, and their child, Hermione. When Paris gets there on this diplomatic mission, Menelaus is getting ready to go to his grandfather's funeral, but not for another 9 days. So they get a good 9 days to party. Guests were sacred in ancient Greece. Hospitality was super, super important. Guests were sacred to Zeus. So if someone came to your house and was like, hey, I'm traveling, can I stay here for the night? Or, you know, someone came on a diplomatic mission and you were like, leave, or you didn't treat them well, Zeus might well get real mad at you for it. So, when we have guests, the guest is Paris, it is time to party it up. So they have a really great week and a half, And, like, Paris gets to know everybody and probably is specifically interested in one particular person. Sources do vary on how exactly Helen felt about Paris, like whether it was reciprocated. Most say, at least, that, like, Paris kidnapped her or carried her off. Several also do insist that she was a willing captive. In Euripides' play, Helen, which Euripides was one of those ancient Greek playwrights. I'm not going to go off on a tangent about ancient Greek playwrights. I'm going to try really hard not to. But in Euripides' play, Helen, Paris doesn't even manage to, like, capture her. Somehow, Hermes swoops in and, like, exchanges the real Helen for a phantom made of clouds and, like, spirits the real Helen off to be kept safe by Proteus, the king of Egypt. There's actually a lot of stuff, apparently, in various accounts of Paris and Helen, I almost said Paris and Helen, Paris and Helen, where they spend a lot of time in Egypt. There's a lot of side stories, side quests. It's Greek mythology. Still, a lot of them just say she was carried off, like, with no word on how she felt about it, because, you know, she's a woman. It's not like she's a whole person. She will talk about it in the Iliad later, if she did go willingly. So, Helen has long been blamed for the Trojan War. She is married to Menelaus, as, you know, if you are in an exclusive relationship with someone, I agree that generally you should maintain that fidelity. My point is, like, I am not trying to say that if Helen went willingly, that she made the right choice. I am not saying that. All of these characters are morally gray at best, right? If she went willingly. Just, again, accounts vary, so this is really up to you as the reader, interpreter, hearer of this story that I am yammering about eventually. I am going to sympathize with her a little bit here, if she went willingly. Again, I'm not saying that she made the right choice, but why would she choose to abandon her child and just go off with this random guy who came here on a diplomatic mission? Not very diplomatic of Paris, in my opinion, but if we explore the possibility that she did choose to go with Paris, that she was a willing captive, I can understand the temptation. Without condoning it, this woman has probably never had control over her own life, like, especially the romantic aspect of it. She was just married off to this old king that they don't really share a lot of interests. He's probably kind of boring, and I mean, if he's anything like his brother, he's the worst, but not even mentioning Theseus. That whole Theseus episode, like, that must have been extremely traumatic, first of all. But now she's been married off to this dude. He's much older than her. They probably don't share a lot of interests. He's probably not even that interested in her as a person, as, you know, anything more than arm candy and someone to bear his children. And, you know, maybe this characterization of Menelaus isn't fair. Like I said, this is all open to interpretation. These stories are very old. My point is, maybe she's not super happy with her marriage. She's never been able to make these kinds of choices. And then along comes Paris, and she doesn't know about his previous wife, but he is, like, handsome, and he pays attention to her. He gave up all of the kingdoms of Europe and Asia and this unfathomable wealth and, like, all of the battle glory in the world just for her. Which, I think it is Euripides' Helen. It's either in there or in Metamorphoses or somewhere with Ovid. She does say, like, I don't care that you think I'm attractive. The thing I am most flattered by is the fact that Aphrodite thought I was a prize comparable to the kingdoms of Europe and Asia. Like, it's nice that you think I'm pretty, but Aphrodite thinks I'm pretty? Theseus is the worst. Say it with me. Theseus is the worst. Again, I'm not saying that, like, it was the best judgment call, but I can understand the desire to just once do what you want to do and follow your heart, and who cares about the consequences. Also, even if she is willing, this probably isn't entirely Helen's decision. Remember how Paris got here in the first place? Like, Aphrodite the goddess of love, who is definitely known to meddle in the love lives of gods and mortals alike, has promised Paris Helen's love. So, like, whether or not Helen was genuinely into Paris, her feelings are probably getting a little nudge in that direction. And by a little nudge, I mean Aphrodite is doing shenanigans. Also, if we remember, Aphrodite has already cursed Tyndareus that his daughters will be adulteresses. Also, Aphrodite has cursed Menelaus for kind of the same thing. Like, apparently, when the whole Oath of Tyndareus thing was going down, Menelaus promised Aphrodite, like, this big sacrifice if he got to marry Helen, and then he got to marry Helen, and he never did it. So Aphrodite is extremely motivated to get Paris and Helen together. My point is, we're all going to interpret this story our own way. Judge Helen if you will, sympathize, a little of both, but keep in mind, she's probably not completely in control here. None of the mortals really are. Aphrodite is strongly motivated to get Helen and Paris together for a lot of reasons. And some say she personally sent a wind to guide Paris' ship as he and Helen sailed away from Sparta, with quite a bit of Spartan treasure, by the way. Like, they took some stuff. Others say Hera was mad about Paris just, like, taking Helen away from her lawful husband and sent a storm that blew them off course. And Paris, fearing the consequences of his actions, was like, you know what, let's just let this be a detour, and turned it into a whole vacation, and that was why they went to Egypt and everything. But Menelaus returns from his grandfather's funeral to find himself down by exactly one demigod wife and one diplomatic guest. He's not happy, obviously. He does send some envoys to Troy to demand that Paris give him back his wife and all the valuables they took. But Helen and Paris aren't even there. Like, they're still on their running from consequences vacation. One account describes it like this. One of the envoys in this account is named Palamedes, who, he is a very eloquent speaker. He's very charismatic and persuasive. And he goes to Troy and he's like, hey, that was really messed up of Paris. Menelaus is straight up ready to go to war. And I think he's justified. You guys should probably do what he wants. And King Priam is like, I get that. He's not here, though. Can we wait until he is here and he can speak for himself? By that point, like, everyone else is kind of on Palamedes' side. Because, you know, it does sound kind of messed up. Whether or not Helen is willing, it's just like, he just kidnapped this dude's wife for no reason. By the time Paris and Helen and all their friends do get there, for the record, I think Helen brought Theseus's mom, who was, like, kidnapped back with her when her brothers went and sacked Athens. The people at the Trojan court, Paris shows up like, hey guys, I'm back. And the people at the Trojan court are like, dude, what is wrong with you? The next day, Menelaus himself shows up and is like, give me back my wife and the treasure you guys took. By now, though, Hecuba, who is the queen of Troy, Priam has like 50 children, probably more than that. Not all of them with Hecuba, but she's the queen. She's the main wife. I mean, not all of his baby mamas are actually his wives. At least one of them was a slave. But Hecuba's the queen of Troy. By now, she has gotten to chat with Helen herself, and Hecuba is refusing to just let Helen be handed over like livestock. So Priam's like, all right, let Helen speak for herself. So they bring Helen out in front of the entire court for Priam to just ask her, do you want to go home? Maybe for the first time in her life, she has a choice. And Helen says, no, I don't want to go home. I want to stay with Paris. That's that. They're not going to make her go back if she doesn't want to go, at least in that account. So, like we pointed out earlier, remember how the Oath of Tyndareus was meant to avoid war? It has backfired spectacularly now. Because Menelaus calls upon all of the other previous suitors to fulfill their vow to respect and defend his marriage. And thus begins the Trojan War. Great job, everybody.